If you drove home from a party after 2 glasses of wine, you'd probably feel at least a little nervous about it. Most people would. We've spent decades building an entire cultural instinct around not driving drunk. Designated drivers, checkpoints, ad campaigns, actual laws with actual consequences. Here's what almost nobody has that same instinct about: pulling an all-nighter or just staying up late enough and then getting behind the wheel the next morning. According to research published in Nature and repeatedly confirmed since, being awake for 17 straight hours impairs your driving about as much as being at the legal alcohol limit. Stay awake for 24 hours, and you're performing worse than someone over that limit. In some tests, worse than someone who's clearly drunk. Nobody checks if you're sleep sober before you drive. There's no test for it, no law against it, no friend taking your keys away. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your brain on no sleep behaves so much like your brain on alcohol, and the specific numbers that tell you when you've quietly crossed that line. This traces back to a study published in Nature in 1997 by researchers Drew Dawson and Catherine Reed, and it's been replicated and cited extensively since. They tested people's performance on hand-eye coordination and reaction time tasks, the same kinds of skills driving depends on, after different amounts of time spent awake, and compared the results directly against performance after drinking specific, measured amounts of alcohol. The numbers that came out of it are strikingly specific. Staying awake for 17 to 19 hours straight produces performance impairment roughly equivalent to a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05%. Push that to 24 hours awake, and performance drops to a level equivalent to about 0.10% blood alcohol, which is above the legal driving limit of 0.08% in most U.S. states. Let that sink in for a second with a concrete example. If you wake up at 6 a.m. and stay awake without a nap until 11 p.m. that same night, 17 hours, and then get in a car, your reaction time and coordination are, on average, comparable to someone who'd be legally too impaired to drive in most of the country. And that's not a wild night out. That's just a long, fairly normal day. This finding wasn't a one-off either. It's been backed up by CDC and workplace safety research since. But here's the question that actually matters more than the number itself. Why would your brain running on zero alcohol behave anything like a brain that's been drinking? The answer comes down to what alcohol and sleep deprivation are actually doing to the exact same systems in your head. Alcohol and sleep loss don't just produce similar symptoms by coincidence. They're hitting a lot of the same neurological targets, just through different doors. Both impair your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for judgment, impulse control, and weighing risk before you act. That's precisely why drunk decisions and sleep-deprived decisions tend to share a certain flavor. Overconfidence, underestimating risk, and a strange inability to accurately judge your own impairment in the moment. Ask a drunk person if they're okay to drive, and they'll often say yes. Ask a severely sleep-deprived person the same question, and you get a similarly unreliable answer, because the exact system you'd use to accurately judge your own state is one of the first things to go offline. Both also slow reaction time in measurable, comparable ways. The literal split-second delay between seeing a hazard and physically responding to it, the single most dangerous variable behind the wheel. And both impair coordination and fine motor control, the kind of steady, precise input a car needs on a highway at 70 miles an hour. Here's where this gets genuinely unsettling, though. At least with alcohol, most people have some internal sense of, I've had a few drinks, I should be careful. With sleep deprivation, that internal alarm system is often the exact thing that's already broken, which means the people most impaired are frequently the ones who feel the most confident that they're fine to drive. This is arguably the most dangerous part of the entire comparison. Alcohol tends to come with some subjective warning signs. You feel the buzz, you notice you're slurring, friends might mention it. Sleep deprivation frequently doesn't offer you that same internal signal, especially once you're used to running on insufficient sleep. Researchers describe something called second wind phenomena, where a severely tired brain can temporarily feel more alert right before a performance crash, which is part of why drowsy drivers are so notoriously bad at self-assessing their own risk in the moment. You can feel reasonably fine right up until you experience a multi-second lapse in attention called a microsleep, a brief, involuntary drift into actual sleep, sometimes just 1 to a few seconds long, that you may not even remember happening afterward. At highway speed, a 2-second microsleep means traveling roughly the length of a football field, with essentially nobody in control of the car. And this isn't some rare, hypothetical edge case. It's a documented, significant contributor to traffic deaths every single year in the U.S. through a mechanism that gets dramatically less public attention than drunk driving does, despite comparable danger. So why has one of these built up decades of cultural alarm bells, while the other one barely registers at all? Part of this is straightforwardly cultural. Drunk driving has been the subject of sustained public health campaigns since the 1980s. MAD, breathalyzer checkpoints, zero-tolerance laws, decades of friends don't let friends drive drunk messaging, drilled into multiple generations. Sleep deprivation has never received anything close to that scale of coordinated public warning, despite research suggesting it's a comparably serious road safety issue. Part of it is also detectability. Police can measure blood alcohol with a roadside breathalyzer in under a minute. There's no equivalent field test for how sleep-deprived is this driver, which means it's dramatically underreported and under-prosecuted in crash investigations, even when it's a likely contributing factor, simply because it's so much harder to prove after the fact compared to a breath test. And part of it, frankly, is that staying up late doesn't carry the same social stigma that drinking and driving does. Nobody hides the fact that they pulled a late night working, studying, or dealing with a newborn. It doesn't feel like a risky choice in the same visceral way that I had a few drinks does, even when physiologically the impairment can be just as real. None of this means you need to panic every time you're a little tired. The actual threshold matters here, and there's a specific number worth knowing before you get in a car, the same way you might mentally track drinks at a party. Here's the practical version. The risk climbs meaningfully once you cross roughly 17 hours of continuous wakefulness, and becomes seriously significant at 24 hours or more. If you're doing rough math on how long you've been awake, and you're already past the 15-16 hour mark, that's worth treating the same way you'd treat, I've had a couple drinks, maybe I shouldn't drive. 1. Know your personal number. If you woke up at 6 a.m., treat anything after roughly 11 p.m. that same day as entering higher risk territory for driving. Not a hard cutoff, but a genuine mental flag, the same way a couple of drinks would be. 2. Watch for the specific warning signs, not just general tiredness. Difficulty keeping your eyes focused, drifting within your lane, missing an exit or a turn you know well, and not remembering the last few minutes of driving are all documented signs of microsleep episodes already starting. Not early warnings, but signs it's actively happening. 3. A short nap genuinely helps, and it doesn't take long. Even a 20-minute nap measurably improves alertness and reaction time. This isn't a folk remedy. It's a well-supported finding in fatigue and aviation safety research, which is exactly why pilots and long-haul truck drivers use scheduled power naps as an actual safety protocol, not a luxury. 4. Caffeine helps, but it has real limits. It can measurably improve alertness short-term, but it does not fully counteract the coordination and judgment impairment from extended wakefulness. Treating a large coffee as a substitute for sleep before driving is a genuinely dangerous miscalculation. 5. And simplest, treat "I'm exhausted" with the same seriousness as "I've been drinking." Call a ride, ask someone else to drive, or simply wait it out with a short nap first. The car doesn't know the difference between the two kinds of impairment, and neither, frankly, does the accident report. So here's the actual takeaway. Your brain doesn't distinguish nearly as much as you'd think between "I had a few drinks" and "I haven't slept in 20 hours. The research says the danger can be genuinely comparable. Reaction time, judgment, coordination, all measurably impaired in similar ways. We just never built the same cultural alarm system for one of them. Next time you're deciding whether you're okay to drive after a long day or a rough night, ask yourself the same question you'd ask after a couple of drinks, because your brain in that moment might not actually know the difference either. If this changed how you think about your next long day behind the wheel, subscribe. I break down what the science actually says. No fluff, no fear-mongering. See you in the next one.